I'm going to call the Social Services Subcommittee to order. And the first thing is disclosure of pecuniary interest and the gender nature thereof. Seeing none, move on to delegations, and there's none scheduled today. And number 4, the report of the Housing Stability Policy and Program Coordinator, the definition of attainable housing. Okay, go ahead. Who's ever going to take this one now?
Thank you, through the chair. I'll speak to this report. It's a report that was requested earlier. So the purpose of this report is for the City of Stratford to adopt a common definition of the term attainable housing. We discussed this term attainable housing on various platforms and in various divisions, specifically in our infrastructure and development, social services, and Invest Stratford. If we adopt the term common definition, this ensures that when we are speaking this term, we are using a common language. Specifically within the current corporate strategic plan in the priority area of developing our resources, one of the objectives is that the city supports the creation of attainable housing. Once we have adopted this definition, it will help refine the key performance indicators to help measure our outcomes on this objective. And right now we are limited to using the number of dwelling units constructed. So we ask that the following definition be adopted, and the definition that we have chosen was affordable to the income level of the household, available for the household, appropriate to the circumstances of the household, including of suitability, quality, and actionable in that it is an option the household can put into action. This is the same definition that we have used in the Housing and Homelessness Plan for Stratford, Perth County, and St. Mary's, as well as the recent project, Stratford Housing Project, a roadmap for attainable market housing development completed by Invest Stratford. So it aligns with those 2 reports that we previously submitted to council, and we're asking for this to be adopted.
So any questions or comments? I think this, oh, go ahead, Martin.
I will certainly move the definition. It gives us kind of a complete understanding, or not complete, but an understanding of when we talk about affordable housing, what we're talking about. So I'm glad there's a definition.
Yeah, and I think it really helps, because when we say affordable, I find the residents all have different ideas of what affordable is, but attainable will make sense. And the government's using attainable now. So if we use it across the board in all the departments, we know it ranges over a vast number of topics, and I think it's a great idea. So basically the recommendation is attainable housing refers to housing that is affordable to the income level of the household, available for that household, appropriate to the circumstances of the household, including of suitable quality, actionable in that it is an option that the household can put into action. So Martin has passed that, and nobody else has any comments or questions. So then I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much for your work on that. So report of the manager of children's services. So information on Canada-wide early learning and childcare funding agreement.
Thank you. So I'm going to have, again, although he's spoken to you briefly prior, this is Darren Barkhouse, our manager of children's services. And as you know, with the recent government announcements, his job is a little busy right now. So he will speak to this report and give you an update of what is happening.
Thank you, Kim, and through the chair. So here today to obviously present this report on the recently announced funding of the Universal Childcare Agreement that we signed with the federal government and the province, just to kind of give an overview of what it kind of briefly entails and some background, and happy to field any questions that you may have. Basically what this includes, it's a $13.2 billion investment into the childcare and early years sector. In a nutshell, it covers off revenue losses for the childcare centers as we reduce the fees for families. So the goal is to get to an average of $10 a day for families by September 2025 is what the province has indicated. And I'll stress that it's an average. So that doesn't mean that every family who currently has childcare will be paying. There's some families we have that don't pay any money for childcare. There's some that pay a significantly subsidized rate. There's full feed families as well. So it's an average of all those fees. So initially, we're going to have retroactive of April 1st is a 25% decrease in fees across the board, whether you're full feed or subsidized or whatnot. And then by the end of this calendar year, by the end of December, it will be a further 25% reduction, totaling 50% total by the end of this year. That likely won't come into effect, like I said, until the very end of December. So families will pretty much only see a 25% reduction this year with a further 25 for the following year. The ministry hasn't fully released all of the funding guidelines for this. However, as I mentioned, it's majorly to cover off the fee reductions and the loss of revenue for these centers. The other piece that's built into this is a wage enhancement piece. It builds on the existing $2 an hour that early childhood educators receive from the province. And it adds a bit of an incentive that's geared more towards the bottom, as the province says, the bottom 25% of RECEs or registered early childhood educators within Perth County currently make less than $18 an hour. And this additional $1 an hour wage enhancement is to help get that 25% up to a wage floor of $18 an hour. That's kind of it in a nutshell, but I'd happy to elaborate on anything else if you've got any further questions.
Has anybody got any questions? Kathy? And then Jody.
I had a question around I know that this program is mostly for licensed childcare providers. So do we have recent numbers on what percentage of children are in licensed care as opposed to unlicensed care, and what the impact may have on the availability of? I'm going to make the assumption that a lot of people that are in unlicensed care will be looking for licensed care given the reduced rate, and what impact that might have on just available childcare.
So through the chair, thank you for that question. A lot of this is still unknown, unfortunately. It is only geared for licensed spaces, both in center-based care and in home-based care. So I have the feeling the province is looking to kind of incentivize some of those unlicensed home care situations to become into the regulated sector. And by doing that, they add an extra, they're legally allowed to have a sixth child instead of the 5 in the unregulated sector. So there's a piece there. Part of the funding as well, only for the wage part of it, is only for RECEs and not for the 50% of the staff that are the support staff that work in childcare centers as well. So there's still a bit of a gap on that. But it's kind of my inkling from the province that they're hoping to kind of lure a number of unlicensed home providers into the system to offset some of those 88,000 odd spaces that they wish to create over the next 5 years. So it will absolutely have an impact on the home sector. However, I don't feel that impact is going to be immediate within at least the next year, likely in the next couple of years, just because the current reduction, the 25% reduction in that licensed care space is almost bringing to the kind of floor of what an unlicensed care space would be. So those price points aren't aligned just yet. By the end of the year, it might drop a little below that threshold. So yeah, I think it kind of puts those unregulated providers in a bit of a sticky situation, and it's hard for them to kind of make that decision to go the license route without having the proper guidelines to back that up.
Thank you. Okay, Jody?
Thank you. Thanks for the report. Yeah, I just noticed that you said that we have a shortage of the RECEs here. So can you speak to that a little bit? Like, if they are going to be creating more spaces, then we obviously need people to work in those positions. I also would note that if it's only 25% of our RECEs are making under $18 an hour at the moment, then it doesn't seem like it's really that much of an incentive to anybody to come into this field. Just a comment.
Oh, thanks for commenting through the chair. Absolutely, you're bang on with the shortage of RECEs within the industry. I think we did a survey back in October, early November of 2021, and it indicated a range of 80 to 90 full-time RECEs. We were lacking just in Perth County alone. That number explodes up into the thousands when you take it to the provincial level, and this is something that we've been advocating as the municipal service managers for a long time now for the province to identify that. And I was actually on a meeting this afternoon with all the officer representatives, and they were very vocal that it was almost offensive what this $1 wage cap was to the industry. They've identified that, yes, it's great news with this funding coming out. It's going to be awesome for families, but they're not addressing the current infrastructure shortfalls with regards to qualified staff to run these programs. We can build centers, and they're happy to fund building centers. I think they said that over the next 5 years, to meet this threshold, the Perth County is going to have to look at creating upwards of 17 new childcare centers, which it's great, and we have like wait lists and the families that would be absolutely lined up to go into these programs. Our problem is with getting the qualified staff to be in the classrooms with these kids. Part of this was addressed, I think the last report I sent to subcommittee about the workforce funding, which was only a one-time allocation that is honestly just going to be a blip on the radar, if I'm being very, very frank with everybody. That needs to be a year-over-year investment, and there needs to be some serious considerations for increasing the wage floor, because if you look at coming out of college with your 2-year diploma, becoming an RECE, and looking at making at the best, or at minimum only $18 an hour, it's not a desirable field to go into. I absolutely love children to death and love working with children, but if for $18 an hour to put that much responsibility on your shoulders and that much hard work and time throughout the week, it's not going to, you're not going to entice people. So we're continuing to advocate, obviously, at the provincial level and the federal level as my fellow, the 47 leads throughout the province. But unless there's some significant changes to that wage scale and wage structure, I'm being very honest, I don't foresee us being able to meet those obligations of filling all those spaces without the staff.
Anybody else have any questions? I have a couple myself. So do you know yourself, like people that are running daycare centers in their home are obviously going to be kind of worried about this, because people aren't going to be taking their children to the home unlicensed daycares because they can get it cheaper at a licensed daycare. And well, I'm not saying that a home care that isn't licensed isn't as qualified as a license, but obviously there's more checks and balances in somebody that's licensed. Do you know the average time it would take to get your daycare at home licensed? Like, would it take a year, 18 months, 6 months? You know what I mean? Do you know approximately?
Depending on what the credentials that the educator has, so long as they have an ECE diploma and they can be registered with the College of ECEs, then it's a fairly expedited process. What we do in Perth County right now through Perth Care for Kids, they are our current home license provider. They have a license set up through Department of Ed, and they oversee, I believe we've got 17 licensed home care providers within Perth County at the moment. And when we do have new people that want to get into that, we kind of filter them through over to Perth Care for Kids, because they can help them expedite that process. So we've got a lot of things in place to help those home providers get into the legal system. It wouldn't take years by any means. If you had all your ducks in a row, presumably it could probably happen in a matter of weeks or a month or two, right? But
wow,
yeah, it won't take long. Mostly because they're starting to kind of expedite some of those processes. And like I said, if you're already have your diploma and you're registered with the College of ECEs, that's going to make things a lot more smoother. There are some loopholes you can jump through without having to have that RECE, but under a license condition, there has to be at least one RECE in the operation. And especially if you're running, if you're the only educator in the household, then that means it's you. So some centers or some homes can get away with it if they have maybe the homeowner isn't an RECE, but they hire an additional RECE, then they can do it in that regard. But my kind of impression from all of this is the government's trying to entice a lot of those home providers into the regulated system to help kind of boost up those license-based numbers. I wouldn't have an exact percentage of how many are in the unlicensed versus the licensed sector. And I'll be honest, there are some amazing centers in the unlicensed world that are going to get affected by this. But they also kind of put out the info that some of these providers, even the center-based providers, they can opt out of this. They don't have to sign into this program. And that's more geared to, I would say, the for-profit based ones, where they may have a clientele and families that are still willing to pay the higher rates. So then they would still have access to all the existing childcare funding that is out there, but they wouldn't have any access to the new CWELCC funding that's been announced. So some centers you may see, probably not in Perth County, I'll be honest, that may not opt into this program and still keep their fees as they are, if they're able to, if they have the confidence that the families are still going to pay those rates. But I can see most of Perth County, pretty much all opting into this. It's hard to say that with full confidence at the moment without having all the proper guidelines and kind of what the restrictions are. The main point of contention that I'm getting back from a lot of our current providers is the inability to raise and lower their fees. So basically the ministry has put a freeze on what their current fees are. They have said that if the center was planning a fee increase, which pretty much all of our centers in Perth County have been planning that, so long as they've communicated that with families, which they all have, I'll be able to honor those increased fees when the time comes. So for example, I believe Anne Hathaway was raising their fees in June. Perth Care for Kids was doing something in September. So I'll be able to honor those rates. However, moving forward, it kind of takes away the center's autonomy to be able to raise some of those fees on their own if they wanted to raise some additional revenues to help offset some different costs. So it kind of keeps their hands in their pockets on it, if that makes sense. So it's tricky. It's going to be good, obviously, so that everything is kind of more closely regulated, so to speak, but it does take a little bit of that freedom away from those centers.
So each center then, okay, so say our daycare, we're planning an increase. You said in June, right? Then the other one was in September, or the other way around? Doesn't matter.
I might be confused. I don't have the exact date in
No,
front of
but
me.
okay, so say it's June, they're having an increase. And then in 2 years, when this process is all finished, so will each licensed daycare get a different subsidy from the government then? Just according to what they were getting paid?
It will depend on what, so sorry, through the chair. So the subsidy is going to be based on what your current fees are. So when we do increase your fees, then I'll have that discretion on the back end to be like, okay, I'll just throwing some numbers out here. So instead of paying $50 a day that they are now, they were going to increase their fees to $55 a day in June. So I'm going to pay the difference in the 50 up until June. And then once their new agreement kicks in, then we'll be able to access more of that funding and pay them out of that. We'll set up new childcare agreements that we won't be able to roll over. They'll have to be renewed every year. And then the ministry has assured us, which I'll be honest, I'm a little skeptical of, the ability to kind of continue to up those fees for them, because we're going to have to, just from inflation to begin with. So they also assured that in the fall of 2023, we'll be able to go back to the kind of the province and the feds are going back to the negotiating table just to make sure that it's still feasible and whatnot. So I think at that time, you're likely going to see some added funding potential, because the number that we are provided, although $13.2 billion sounds like a lot of money, I don't think it's going to be enough to get to the end goal of this.
Well, there's what, 444 municipalities, like you're going to have to split it out, and then how many there is, and then all the ones that aren't licensed. So if you aren't licensed and you don't have your certificate, does it take about 2 years to get yours through the school? A year, 4 years, you know?
Through the chair, depending on what if you're starting fresh and you don't have any other educational background, then it's a 2-year diploma program. And that includes three individual placements. If you've got some previous schooling, a degree or a different diploma that's relatable, there's a fast track avenue through most of the colleges. I know through Conestoga and through Fanshawe that I'm most familiar with. There's fast track options that you can potentially do it in a year or less, depending on how many placements you need to do. There's also an equivalency that you can get through the Ontario colleges. It's a child practitioner certificate that helps to negate a lot of the placement element of it. So then you can expedite the ECE diploma process. So long story short, at bare minimum, 2 years. And if you have certain credentials already, then less than a year.
So all these people that right now are unlicensed and don't have a degree, they basically should be starting now to get their degree going. And while they're going for that degree, they still won't be eligible until they actually get their certificate, right?
Yep.
Wow. And then, so I want to make sure I got this clear. So what happens is basically the childcare will still be able to increase their needs for their childcare, but the people that are taking their children there will pay less. So the childcare, say I had some children in my home and I was licensed, then I would get subsidized from the government for the difference, even as I raise my prices. Right? Okay, I just want to make sure I had that clear.
Yeah, so through the chair, so long as that's been communicated to your families that there was a price increase plan this year, as the CMSM, I'm able to honor that with the rates that we will put out to the families.
Right.
I think we're going to the first round of rebates that will be going out to the families that are currently in licensed care. We'll likely handle that internally, so we don't have to burden that administrative burden to all of our providers. Speaking of administrative side of things, we were initially projected to claw back to a 5% allocation for the following year. They've told us that we're able to stay at the 10% threshold, which is great news, so that we can use some of that for the administrative burden this is bringing on. But we're optimistic that after this first rebate check are issued, that we'll be able to internalize all this with the current operating systems that we have through OCCMS, it's called. They're planning some upgrades to that system to be able to just do this right on the spot, so we won't have to go through and be writing checks for hundreds of families throughout Perth County a second time. So this should all be able to be just included right in with their current payment structure. Likewise for the home care.
That would be a lot of work if we had
It is and it isn't.
Getting checks every month, right?
Well, no, we would just, for the initial rebate that will be backdated to or retroactive to April 1st, we'll have everything paid up. So we'll do it at the end of the month or whatnot. It'll likely be the end of May is what I'm hopeful, if we can get all the guidance and we don't have any of the money yet, obviously, so we can't start issuing those checks, but I'm hopeful for the end of May, which is roughly in line with what the ministry is saying to get those checks out. And then by that time, we would just have to issue a check for April and May fees. And then by June, hopefully it's already built into the system and it's just automatically how we collect and pay out fees now.
Okay. And like most of the children that are in daycare are the younger children now, right? And you need more workers to take care of them than you do, like, say, a 5 or 6 or 7 or 8-year-old, right? So
it depends. Sorry. So through the chair. Yeah, so it depends on the age. So when we're looking at an infant space, for example, it's a 1 to 6 ratio. So you've got 3 educators in that room as opposed to 2. So that's going to increase your cost. So typically infant spaces are more expensive for that reason, that they have an extra staff. Otherwise, it's typically a 1 to 8 or 1 to 10 ratio as you get older. So it depends on the group. But yeah, there's only a handful of our centers that do offer those infant spaces. So they're very much in demand, but our toddler spaces are through the roof through Perth County. So that's the major strain that we're seeing right now. So our wait lists are there, but we don't have the physical capacity of educators to fully combat the current wait lists that we have.
And they're also planning that they might have to build more daycares, right?
Absolutely. So we have.
And they'll be totally 100% funding that, right?
Yep. So there, we've got two partnership funds going on right now. The current builds, one in Milverton, and it's in addition to the Milverton Public School, and the second one is in Listowel at Eastdale. We also just submitted another partnership proposal with the school board for 2 additional spaces here in Stratford, childcare centers, which the recently announced ones for Perth East and North Perth are in the range, I think it's 78 or so are the new spaces created. And then the next proposal that we just submitted with the school board is an additional, I believe, 102 spaces. So we're hopefully going to be approved on both of those. Both sites have infant capacity as well. Our problem is going to be in 2 years when they're ready to open their doors, is if we have the educators to do it. Currently, the 3 newest builds that we have, the 2 up in North Perth, one in Listowel, one in Moncton, they are both operating at full capacity right now. The third one in Milverton, not Milverton, in Mitchell, that's run by Perth Care for Kids. It's a 4-room standalone center next to their current space, and it only has 1 of the 4 rooms operational due to a shortage of staff. So if we have the staff, we can absolutely get our numbers up and be operating at full capacity across the whole county. That's just our drawback, is the availability of the quality educators.
Well, and we're seeing that everywhere, the nurses and doctors, and well, and just general. I remember when we were at that I think it was like a municipal day educational thing, and that lady was explaining how worldwide the figures have dropped because people are only having what, 1.2 children. Some are electing to have none, and there's not, in another 30, 40 years, we're really going to be short of people because there isn't going to be any people to, even though it seems like there's a lot of us, but I mean, Stratford, we're seeing it everywhere, signs everywhere, help needed, and yet we have a low employment rate. So yeah, so anyway, very interesting. Did anybody else have any questions or concerns or? Okay, so So the motion is that the report titled Information on Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Funding Agreement be received for information, and that any follow-ups or alterations to the workforce funding line be communicated to the Social Services Subcommittee accordingly. No other, Jody? You're moving that? Okay. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. And sorry, anybody against? Guess not everybody was voting for. Carried. Is there anything else anybody wanted to bring up or concerns or anything?
Through the chair, I just wanted to quickly mention, which I did in the first report, that I want to thank Infrastructure Development and Stratford Invest working on this report with us to bring the definition forward.
Well, I think it's really important that Invest Stratford is involved because they're involved with bringing business in. That's workers, and lots of workers have children. So it's going to be very important. So, well, if there's nothing else, I'm looking for a mover to adjournment. Councillor Bacalasis. All in favor? Carrie, go out and enjoy the rest of this beautiful day. Thanks very much.